All right, there we go. So we are here with Omar from the Tilted Lawyer. This has been a long time coming because everybody's been asking me to do this. But we are with the man, a professional practicing lawyer. If you guys want to check out his link, which is down in the description below, the Tilted Lawyer, like I said, he's definitely knows his stuff. He's been looking at a whole bunch of different cases besides the Chris Watts case. But with my channel, definitely Chris Watts has been a known subject to talk about. And I want to go to a professional, and who better not than Omar himself.
Yes,
So,
sir.
so welcome, Omar.
It's a pleasure.
So we are talking a lot of questions that have been going around, obviously, that people have been asking me. Two subjects, which is one, Chris Watts and possible wanting to get out, or him trying to get out. And the other one being Nichol Kessinger. What could she be charged with other than accomplice to murder, second-degree murder? A lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, there has been rumors about manslaughter. And I'm just like, okay, well, I don't know too much of it. So that's why I wanted to talk to Omar. So first we're going to talk about is Chris Watts.
Okay.
And his possibility of getting out with 25 years of good behavior. What is your partake on this?
I'm pretty sure he was not sentenced to a 25 to life sentence, was it? Wasn't it just life?
It was life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Right. That was the sentence. So
yeah.
Now he wants a reduction to 25 to life.
He says with 20, or he says in certain forums and so forth, and the people that he's allowed to talk with, that if he's good on good behavior for 25 years, that he's going to be able to get out for good behavior.
No, that's not how that works. That's just not how that works. Otherwise, I mean, there's a lot of good behaving criminals out there that are doing life sentences without possibility of parole. Like, for example, there's mandatory, I know it's not California, but in California, and it's pretty across the board similar. Like when you're convicted of a violent felony, you're serving time for that. Good behavior only gets you so far. It's statutorily mandated. You may get a 15% reduction in your sentence. That's it. If it's a misdemeanor or some kind of lower level felony or some kind of negotiated plea, like if you're not in state prison but you're staying in county, then you get 1-for-1 credits, 50% off for good behavior. That's it. That's what you get. Mm-hmm. It's never really been a discretionary thing. That's what probation is for. So they say 25 to life. When you're 25 years in, then we'll consider your good behavior and all of that. But that wasn't worked into the plea deal. That's not what was bargained for. So whenever you're discussing a sentence that was bargained for, the people had a right to take this all the way to trial and prosecute him to the max, the death penalty. They didn't because they wanted to save, for a million different reasons. Want to save the family from a trial. They wanted to not air out everybody's dirty laundry. They wanted to respect the memory of the victims. They wanted to not drag everybody through a high profile trial that was going to have everybody in the public eye. But they had it. They did it under certain conditions. We will not prosecute you for death, but you have to agree to life without parole. That's it. It was a bargain for plea. So it was part of the contract and part of the deal that and the understanding of the people that he was never going to get out. If it was ever the case where he had a chance at parole, the people would have said, F that. No, we're not. There's not going to be any plea. It's life or nothing. There's none of this with timeout with good behavior, none of this, whatever. It's straight life sentence. Now, I understand that he's tried to attack his confession, make arguments about undue influence and other things, which was going to fall on deaf ears because, I mean, there's legitimate arguments to make about his confession being not above board. They're not good arguments, but you can make the argument that he was coerced by the two FBI agents investigating the crime when he was being interrogated, that they led him down and backed him into a corner and psychologically forced him to confess to something he wasn't guilty of. You can try to make that argument, but it's much better made in the course of a criminal trial, not on appeal. Because when you look at those videos on appeal, I mean, just look at the making of a murderer case. What was that guy's name? The kid, the 16-year-old. He made a confession. Brendan Dassey.
Oh, yeah.
He makes this confession while he's underage. And they have gone all the way to the Supreme Court, trying to get that case to the Supreme Court, trying to overthrow his confession because he was a minor, and the coercive tactics of the interrogators and all of that kind of stuff. You're not going to find any much sympathy for a 30-year-old. What was he, 32 at the time?
Yeah.
32 years old. There was ample evidence to convict aside from the confession. There was a factual basis for everything. You have corroborating evidence all over the place. He had a right to counsel. I watched those interrogations, as did you. He waived his right to counsel in a very knowing, brash, naive manner, but he did it because he thought that he was going to very stupidly talk his way out of the evidence that they had. He didn't know what they knew. And so there's not very many legal basis that he has to hang his hat on. He can't even rely on the most common one, which is ineffective assistance of counsel, which is like, I would have never made that confession if my attorney did a better job, or the only reason I lost the trial was because my attorney sucked and he didn't listen to my that I told him there was all this other evidence that we could have had and he just ignored it, and therefore I'm convicted and sentenced to 25 to life. He can't even make that argument because he waived his right to counsel. He made the confession, and it was bargained for a plea. It wasn't even rash. It was by the time he made the confession to the time there was a plea deal, do you remember how much time had passed?
Not much. I mean, it was days that he pretty much confessed, and they not sentenced him, but within from August till November, I mean, that's only a few months, and he was signed, sealed, delivered, and sentenced.
August to November is a lifetime when you're sitting inside of a jail cell.
Mm-hmm.
You got nothing but to think about all of the stupid things you said to the interrogator that got you locked up in the first place. And there wasn't really any contention about the plea deal because he was bargaining for it, agreeing to it, signing documents that said that he knowingly and intelligently entered into this plea. And then after the fact, some dipshit attorneys going in there trying to do a jail visit. Oh, we'll definitely get you out, but you're going to have to pay. Well, I don't know if that was a conversation. I just speculate. Hey, high profile Christopher Watts. I could get my name out there, and I defended Christopher Watts in his appeal. And, maybe they're taking a shot at fame or some kind of a boost to their law firm.
But doubt it.
Yeah. And then he's in there in the law library and he's looking up laws and things and thinking that they apply to his case. It's funny. I was just asked this question on another live stream that I did about the prevalence of AI in terms of representing yourself. And I was like, yeah, it's not a good idea if you're not an actual attorney, because it tends to have the effect of making people that don't know anything about the law sound really dumb in court because they don't know. Look, AI will spit out this beautifully written 500-page legal argument that could, for all you know, be based on fake law, be based on fake precedent. It'll sound really good and hit all of the AI objectives, but it's not going to hit the mark legally for what you're trying to do. And so he's in there. Imagine he's looking up all of these reasons why he could possibly appeal his case. And now he starts, well, hell, I'm going to be in here for the next 50, 60 years until I'm dead. Why not just take a shot at it? Worst case scenario, they tell me that I lost and I'll take a crack at something else. He's no different than any other serial killer or high profile killer that's ever been convicted of a crime and had time on his hands to sit and ponder a possible way out of his current situation. That's where he is. Chances of him getting out, I'll tell you what it would take. There is a legitimate path to him getting out of prison. Want to know what it would be?
Yes, very much so.
Brand new evidence, not available at the time, whereby somebody else, backed by some kind of other unknown evidence not previously published, confesses to the crimes.
So if he technically said Nichol was involved, he's
been saying that, hasn't he? Didn't he try to say that?
He did. I mean, he said how many different times we, as in not just himself, that we were out there with a shovel and rake. Apparently he's mentioned it to his jail cellmates that Nichol was involved. So I mean, if he came to publicly state Nichol Kessinger was involved, would that open it up to an actual trial?
I don't put much stock into whatever he's telling his cellmates. I mean, he's just talking shit. I mean, that's the equivalent of, hey, how much you want me to bet I could throw a football over those mountains? You know, those are his buddies at this point. What are you going to do? You're embellishing stories, whatever. It would take, for example, Nichol Kessinger saying, look, I can't live like this anymore. I got to get this off my chest. I was responsible for the deaths of all 4. And I tricked Christopher Watts into going along with his plan to help me cover it up, but I'm the one that actually did it. And I just need people to know that because it's on my conscience. I can't live with myself any longer. And then there's corroborating scientific evidence to back it up. And now you have the basis for perhaps we got the wrong guy. But that would be new evidence that wasn't available at the time of the confessions or at the time of the plea deal that would have the effect of changing the circumstances. Unless you think that that's on the horizon, he's not getting out anytime.
Yeah. I don't see him getting out ever. If he's going to get out, it's going to be in a casket.
Yeah.
Much.
He's going to spend the rest of his days trying to conceive of ways and plans to try to escape. I don't know. Maybe he tries to recreate that movie Alcatraz from 1979 with Clint Eastwood.
He's going to doubt it.
Shawshank style out of his cell through the sewers out into the open mud on a rainy day. I don't know. But he's not going to get out by any legal means that I could envision.
So pretty much his parents and his posse of Team Chris can rest assured that he will not be getting out.
I'll tell you what, good luck with that. It's like a case I had this morning. This guy was telling me he wanted to argue all these different points. I'm like, look, if you think that's going to work, it's your right to argue those things. Maybe you go in there and you'll show me how it's done.
Yeah, when you're the professional.
Yeah.
So, and then the last thing I'd like to talk about is the Nichol Kessinger. Obviously, things we've looked at before on your side, my side, things don't add up. Things look very weary. Obviously, I don't think she is myself innocent because an innocent person wouldn't be in hiding. But for those that have stated that, I can't say for certain that she's has physical hands-on because we can't prove it. But they didn't give her a chance to actually prove her innocence, that I feel, and that people are stating that public, or I shouldn't say public, but private detectives, that apparently there's a couple that would like to take on this case, but feel that they would be denied because of DA that I won't mention.
That's nonsense.
It's nonsense because some of those are public records, some of it. Yeah. But a lot of people think that she could be charged for manslaughter, tampering with evidence. What was the other one? There's one other one, but I wanted to get your partake on it. If manslaughter would even be on the table, if that was even in question.
Okay, so I very famously or unfamously really tried my darndest to make the evidence fit a conviction for Nichol Kessinger. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fun with the hypothetical cross exam with my assistant playing the role,
which you guys need to watch if you guys have not watched it already. So I will post a link in the description for that mock trial that he did.
That would have been basically a dream scenario where, number one, there's enough to charge her with something, and number two, she was stupid enough to take the stand and waive her Fifth Amendment right to not testify. In other words, it would never happen in real life, but hypothetically, I think it did a really good job of exposing all of the main questions that everybody had and what would be her logical answers. And even with as ridiculous as her answers were, I mean, played by my assistant, it was very difficult. Although we made her look really bad, I even made my assistant cry. She looked really bad and really guilty. But was it enough to get to beyond a reasonable doubt? No. At the end of the day, I think the general consensus was like they were rooting for me, and they were like agreeing with the questions, and they were really entertained at the format and everything else. But when it really came down to it, when you took emotion out of it and objectively look at the holes in the evidence, we could not get to beyond reasonable doubt. The most damning piece of evidence we had, aside from the speculative phone calls at various times during the investigation, and the cell phone ping at, what was it, like 6:32 in the morning or something like that. That was the most damning piece of evidence that we had, and it just wasn't enough to tie her into anything. Now, we speculated that there might have been other evidence, threads that were found in the backyard on a fence post, presumably to drag the body that way as opposed to out the front of the door through the truck. There was evidence that was not tested, DNA evidence that may have evidenced Nicole's DNA in the car at the same time as the girls and everybody else. But then the question would have been, okay, but isn't it possible that could have been from like months earlier? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to pin it down, and we'll never know because that wasn't sent to any labs to even know whose DNA that might have actually been there in the first place. And it's probably not getting recovered at this point. I'm pretty sure it's probably been destroyed. So you're not going to have any DNA evidence that exists from the initial investigation. If a private investigator were to get in and get enough evidence on Nicole to bring charges, he's going to have to create new evidence. And how do you create new evidence? You have to get her to confess. Maybe
he's probably not going to do that.
Oh, maybe it's undercover. Maybe he gets some guy and starts chatting her up at a bar somewhere. He discovers her secret identity and finds her at a bar in I don't know, Wyoming. And they're sitting down and shooting the breeze. And then, she's infatuated with this new guy. And then she starts confessing her deepest and darkest secrets because it's part of the initiation rites for the sex cult that she may or may not have been a part of. And then, he's wearing a wire or something. And then you'd have to find a way to make those secret recordings admissible, or at least get them to the appropriate people that would be willing to officially bring charges on him. And then maybe you could potentially get her for something other than conspiracy to commit murder.
It's a lot.
Yeah. What is out there right now? I couldn't ethically charge her, even hypothetically, with anything other than a conspiracy involving victims that were murdered. What I can, well, you can't, because you can't, you could speculate that, oh, she must have been in the house, she must have been helping Chris, perhaps with the Shanann, or maybe she was the ones that strangled the girls. I've heard all those theories. You're never going to find any physical evidence to support it. It's never going to go past pure conjecture. So in terms of actual evidence that somebody could maybe listen to, you're going to have to drag her out into some public place where she doesn't have a Fourth Amendment right to secrecy or privacy, where she's on surveillance camera admitting to certain crimes that she has been speculated to have been a part of. And maybe on those grounds, you'd be able to get whatever charges you get her to confess to. But for right now, 5 years ago, the best you could have done was conspiracy. And I think the DA chose not to bring the charges because they just, they were pretty confident that they had the person. The problem with that is when you wrap up investigations too quickly, what happens? You make mistakes. Just like the Idaho 4 case, they very quickly said that Kohberger was the guy, and they're having problems now because of ways that evidence was collected and various other things. To the point where it looks like this guy Kohberger, where he was going to be the guy, looks like they may have a chance. They might have a chance. It's not a slam dunk with him. So, we're a long road from anything happening to Nicole. My guess is she's going to continue to live a life of pure anonymity under whatever name it is that she's chosen to take on. I'm guessing she probably doesn't look like Nichol Kessinger anymore. Does anybody know or have any recent pictures of her? Okay.
I do, because her friends have taken pictures of her and I've seen her. She's gained some weight. She's with a different man. I have told the person I will not share a picture because it's obviously in the person's home. And that's another thing. It's like, I don't care where this woman lives. I don't care what she's doing with her life, to the point where I just wanted her to actually be investigated compared to interviewed. But like you said, you have to come up with new evidence. You're going to have to find, you can't go off on conspiracy anymore because it's either destroyed, gone, old, and or people have been asking too, can you at least charge her for lying to law enforcement or deleting of those? Can you at least charge her for those?
I'm pretty confident that the statutes that would have allowed them to prosecute her for that have long since passed. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect.
So
I mean, it's been 5 years at this point. But yeah, if they were going to do that, they would have done it a long time ago. And I think that they knew that there was things that she was not truthful about, but they were trying to coax more information out there. I mean, such as the process of interrogations. You know that people are lying about certain things. She wasn't under oath, as far as I'm aware, from any of those interrogations. So lying to law enforcement and interfering with a police investigation, probably not, man. Because they had their sights set on Christopher Watts. They had enough information to convict Mr. Watts, and ultimately they got a confession. So what exactly did she interfere with? Now, if Christopher Watts never confessed and she told those mistruths, misleading investigators, maybe we're talking about something else, but they got their guy. Investigation was wrapped up and they weren't worried about no Nichol Kessinger. And that's why we're at where we're at with this case.
So like a lot of us YouTubers pretty much know that this may never come about again, ever again.
I think that my advice to people that are wanting to continue to pursue this is that you have to get imaginative, because you have to let the old evidence go. The old evidence is never, ever, 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 ever going to be enough to bring new charges or to get a conviction. It's just not. That's over and done with. What does creativity mean? I don't know. That's why it's called creativity. You conjure it from thin air. You conjure it through inspiration. You conjure it through, many different channels. But this idea that the investigation was botched is probably true. But what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? It's done, and the evidence is destroyed. And that's the reality of anybody picking up on this case new. Now, I'm skeptical of the new private investigators that say they're being roadblocked by anybody officially involved in the old investigation. That doesn't make any sense to me. Unless what they mean is they're trying to get records that were deemed confidential in the old case, and they're being blocked that way because of legal reasons. There's still ways to get around that. Mm-hmm. So I don't buy that somehow DA, whoever, is blocking access to new people trying to do honest investigations. That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. I know that there's some things that he said that they're never going to release, but I don't know what that would entail.
Would it entail like autopsy photos?
Well, we don't need to look at that stuff.
Crime scene photos, things like that.
Okay.
But I don't see why you couldn't get your hands on, for example, the remnants of DNA samples that were collected and never tested, to the extent that they still exist.
Yeah, if they haven't destroyed them, like you said.
Yeah, and then you'd have to come up with a theory about how those would be useful in a trial. Let's just assume, for the purpose of assuming, that those untested samples were tested, and it came back unequivocally that you had DNA remnants from all four of the victims, Chris Watts and Nichol Kessinger. What does that mean? All it means is that at one point, somewhere around 2017, every single one of those people were inside of that vehicle. It doesn't tell you dates.
Doesn't tell you when.
Doesn't tell you when. Doesn't tell you for how long. And it may not even, it might not even tell you even that. You may not even have DNA from Nichol Kessinger in that car. You might, but we just don't know. The question is, if you found that to be true, then what? Because we know that she's been inside that house. We know, I'm assuming that she's been inside Christopher Watts' car. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what the story was, whether or not she was ever inside Nicole's car or not Nicole, Shanann's car or not.
A couple times.
Yeah. So if she was in Shanann's car, she must have been at some point inside of Christopher's car. Mm-hmm. During the course of their 1 year or 3 month rendezvous, however long you want to attach to it. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that, if I'm a DA, the fact that you found DNA inside the car of Chris's car is good for you. Now, what do you want to do with it? What's your theory? It's like, well, then all of these theories you're going to present, that's fine. They're theories, but you're not going to pin that down beyond a reasonable doubt, because the bottom line is, regardless of whether or not you want to believe her stories or not, no matter how reprehensible her behavior or the sound of her voice or her vocal fry or the way that she misled investigators or the way that it looks like she was involved in certain different ways and cell phone things and all of that, you're never going to pin her down for guilt on this case because she told a story that makes some kind of sense. I'll tell you what, of the comments in the videos that I did on this Watts case, specifically the Kessinger one, 98% of the comments are negative towards Nichol Kessinger. But there is probably not even that high, maybe 90%. But there's these other 10%, and there's one comment that stands out on one of my videos where she starts describing Nichol Kessinger as like this wild soul, this wild person that I would have loved to have I would have paid real good money to hang out with her for 10 minutes because she was this wild person. She got herself caught in an affair and she was embarrassed when she got caught. And, does that make her guilty of having an affair? Yes, but it doesn't make her a murderer and basically on the side of leave Nichol alone. What are we doing here? She was an interesting person. She got caught in a bad situation. It could have happened to any one of us. And there's no evidence to point to her guilt and all that kind of stuff. Even if you don't subscribe to that narrative, there are at least 1 or 2 jurors on a set of 12 that would believe that narrative. So how are you getting a conviction on that case without better evidence?
Because all jurors have to agree, correct?
Well, we just saw it on the Karen Reed case. The Karen Reed, I don't know how familiar you are with that one, but if you were looking for a case where there's mountains of reasonable doubt everywhere you look, all it took was one to hold on to this theory that no, Karen Reed is a murderer. No matter how you slice it, I'm not changing my mind. And because of that, we got a mistrial on that case. And that is the nature of these criminal trials. Jeez. You need all 12 to agree. That's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. I know mistrials are not that common, but it is really hard to get 12 people to agree on anything.
So it's going to be 2 sides to everything.
Yeah. And think about it. Who is the jury? They come from all walks of life. They come from all different religions, all different races, all different ages, young and old, different religions, different philosophical, moral compasses. And every single one of them get to weigh in and have an opinion. And if you don't have stone cold evidence to pin them down so that they're not allowed to look in other directions, then they're allowed to rely on their real life experience. And anytime you got a jury to do that, then you're guaranteed to have an acquittal or a hung jury. That's just the nature of criminal defense. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news. All I'm saying is because I know how hard you've worked on this case, like for years.
Yep.
I don't mean to say that it's impossible. All I'm saying is the longer we keep on looking at evidence that is dead, you can't expect any life to come from that. It has to come from some kind of creative inspiration. You're not going to get like the public in all of their clamorings for a conviction is not going to convince the DA to bring a case, no matter how many signatures you got. I don't know if it was something that you had organized or something that somebody else had organized, but I had heard that there was like this petition going around.
It's not something that I did. It was one of my viewers. But I mean, going on to like change.org, I mean, if you go in there, there's like 14 different petitions for Nichol, and all the signatures added up to like 75,000. But again, signatures aren't going to do nothing if the DA doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah, there's no legal effect of those signatures. It's not a vote. There's only one vote that matters. That's the DA. It's in his opinion. If there's not a case, he's not bringing one. And so
unfortunate.
I'm not trying to dash the hopes and dreams of those that are looking for justice who believe that Nichol was involved. All I'm saying is it's going to take a little bit of creativity, maybe a little bit of elbow grease. And then, at some point, you also have to be, either you're going to pursue this in the hopes that you have some creative inspiration, or you got to be willing to let it go and just accept the fact that Nichol might have just been behaving poorly in a morally reprehensible way. And, despite her intentions, she never intended to happen what did happen. And I know that you're going to look at her behavior and say, but that doesn't make sense. And I know we've been doing that for years, but we don't have anything more. And so we in my professional opinion, the investigation that was faulty. And because of that, there's not much there left to sift through to gain traction on charges for Nichol Kessinger. So you got to go looking for something new.
So you heard it, guys. So for those that keep asking, the old stuff is not going to work anymore. We got to be creative. We got to look at other aspects and so forth like that. So I'm going to leave it there. Omar's got stuff to do. He just got home. So we need to get him probably with the family, showered, eat, and get ready for his stream. So
all those things. You're welcome to jump on if you wanted to. I'm just going to be talking about some Karen Reed stuff, or you don't have to.
I definitely will.
Yeah.
I definitely want to get into that case because I definitely want to look into some other cases as well, rather than just this one. So
I'll tell you what, I'll shoot you a link, and whenever you want to shoot on in there, just go for it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever you got time for.
Sounds good. Well, that being said, guys, that is the Tilted Lawyer with his professional partake on those few topics that we talked about. Again, links there in the description for this man if you guys would like to check out his channel. And hopefully you guys have a fantastic day.
All right, folks. See you all next time.